Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hello, this is Adam Huss coming to you from Los Angeles. Thanks so much for listening. The blood of the land is how Jason Kesselring refers to wine. Jason grows grapes and makes wine in a place that sounds like it's from Game of Thrones, where winter temperatures drop well below 30 degrees, below zero, and summer temperatures can get over 100 degrees, where wind blows viciously year-round and tornadoes are common in the summer, and where last year at the end of May the temperature dropped to minus 23 degrees. Welcome to North Dakota, one of the most extreme climates in the Americas. Kesselring Vineyards is America's only Vitis Riparia Vineyard, and it's been around for over a decade. Jason started the vineyard by observing and tagging wild vines, taking cuttings in the winter and propagating them a few feet away in his vineyard. Then he created additional blocks via massale selection. And when I say propagate, I mean he literally just stuck the cuttings in the ground. And Jason says he actually had to spray them once in the last 15 years. What Jason is doing is revolutionary. But at the same time, it's the most natural thing that humans have been doing for thousands of years. The question it begs is, why isn't this the basis of American viticulture and wine? As you hear Jason's incredible story in his understated way that seems characteristic of this place in the world, that question becomes more and more poignant. As I talked to Jason, I became overwhelmed, not by what he was doing, but by how surreal and absurd the imported Eurocentric wine world is that I generally inhabit and that dominates the wine industry. I cannot thank Jason enough for bringing somewhat of an outsider's perspective to hold a mirror up to my way of thinking and for introducing me to a new world of extreme beauty. Enjoy. Well, Jason, welcome. I'm really glad that you could have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to be having the conversation.
So your last name is Kesselring, and we're talking about Kesselring Vineyard or vineyards. Is it plural?
Yep.
Or will it be plural? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I mean, technically we could just really have six acres producing right now. So
Okay.
It's been kind of in stages, and we kind of started with a small little plot, and then we kind of had the idea that we'd write a grant to see if we could get some money for the second plot. I did it that way.
Yeah, well,
And we got some money, and people were interested locally in what we were doing with the sustainable agricultural research sort of thing. And so it was really cool that people were digging in what we were doing as well, so we were starting to add on a third part, and now we've added on a fourth, which is basically double our size. But
well, let's sorry, go ahead. Did you want to finish that?
No, go ahead.
The thing that I think will be interesting, that you've gotten a grant to plant a vineyard already says that something is unusual, because most of us wine growers would not probably qualify for grants to grow our grapes. Yeah. So I want to set the stage a little bit. Where are these vineyards located?
It's on the east border of North Dakota. It's in the Cheyenne Valley, which is a river that feeds into the Red River, Red River of the North, that goes up into Canada. Cheyenne
I think
Valley,
a lot of people. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Cheyenne Valley is kind of a little bit different. If you've ever been to North Dakota, a lot of people come to Fargo and they see a flat sort of area that's almost like Nebraska. Cheyenne Valley is a bit different. It's kind of closer to where western North Dakota is. It's the sand hills, and there's a lot of rolling hills. It's kind of the beginning of what we would consider kind of western kind of landscape, as opposed to it's very Midwestern looking, and is a different soil type in the Red River Valley compared to the Cheyenne. We have a sandy loam sort of soil, where in the Red River Valley it's gumbo sort of clay, and it's a different. I mean, I have friends that are growing grapes there and do great things with grapes. They're into the hybrid thing, but we're into what's native to North America, which is the Vitis Riparia. And
right. So yes. So that is the really exciting thing. So I mean, I stumbled upon you, and there's just a little, you know, cool thing. I'm going to be honest. I think I was looking for. I was researching deer, uh, how to deal with deer in the vineyard. I
Uh-huh.
was just looking for alternative ideas, that weren't like full exclusion, 10-foot high fences,
Right.
or implementing guinea hens that are going to annoy me,
Yeah.
or anything like that. And I think that you had something on your website about that. And I just was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I clicked the about page and I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So you say, I mean, so you state basically that you're the only Vitis Riparia vineyard in America. And
Yeah.
do you want to talk about how you got the vines for your vineyard, and how you developed your vineyard?
Yeah. Initially we had a few from South Dakota, and I mean, 2 rows, and we messed around with.
Now, where did those come from?
They're kind of closer to Valiant, or where is it? Vermilion, North South Dakota, which is, you go straight down from where we're at, so it's a little bit warmer there. And the thing is, long story short, we had these planted, and we had a freeze out, and they weren't really cutting it in the kind of severity of our uh, uh, winters in North Dakota. So, for years I'd been, one year I just made a point in the winter to tag every vine that I could find along the Cheyenne, because we literally have the ranch or the farm like along the Cheyenne.
So these are wild grapes that you're walking along.
Totally.
Like, these
They're
are just
they're
the
like
native grapes that have grown for
10,
forever
yeah,
there.
like 20 feet away from the site of where we're doing stuff. And not only that, but there's, it's going in maybe up to a mile into our land. We're along the rivers. And I've been, over the years, and our ranch hands or whatever have been on the lookout for these things, specifically looking for big fruit and good tasting fruit, because there's a whole host of different. I mean, there's the males, because it's not like a normal
Right.
grapevine. Wild grapes, there's male and female vines. So
Right.
a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people will be like, well, I can't get these things to grow, and there's no fruit coming from them. Well, you have a male vine, probably.
Right.
And that's kind of a little trick there. But uh,
That's right. What are they are normal, like what, most people are growing out here in California, are they hermaphroditic? Is that do you know the science behind their,
oh,
or the biology?
yeah, I do. And is it like there's dioecious, and then which I believe is ours, which it's
Okay.
it's basically sexed, where it's self-pollinating for the domestic grape. And so that's a weird thing straight away, that what
Right.
separates us, because I got to think about, in the vine vineyards I planted some males in there just as a backup, so that I make sure the
Oh.
fruit set happens.
Do they provide pollen? I mean, are they
Mhm.
necessary? They are. Okay.
Yeah, and
Cool.
really talking, and I've talked to a lot of people, because I mean, right, we have a ton of males right on the bend where we're at, so we should be cool as far as everything, fruit set happening. But I use some of them for windbreak. That's another thing we can get into maybe later. Is it's really
Oh.
windy in North Dakota, and it kind of
Oh.
helps with the pruning, I suppose, is one way to look at it, given it's a
Yeah.
very vigorous plant. Um, it's I mean, getting back to just how we found them. I mean, we've been doing this for years, just tagging them and looking out, and somebody will come back and you'll be like, oh, we saw some over here, let's get them. And then we got vineyard 2 planted. Then we started seeing what was producing out of that, and taking cuttings, and in February or whatever, and then planting those in vineyard
So
3.
doing like a further refinement with a massale selection, so the best of the best kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, uh we're doing, I mean, it's old school in the truest sense, I suppose. We're just, we're taking what we see. I mean, it's almost caveman like.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I have friends that are way more like scientific, and they have chemistry backgrounds and everything, and we're more like you down in the dirt, I suppose, and kind of just trying to see what tastes good in nature, pull it there, how it responds to just a simple kind of classical uh, training and pruning, you know.
Yeah.
And
And you're
no, go ahead.
so you've tagged you started out by literally tagging the native plants that were just growing wild along the riverbank. In the winter
Yeah.
you came, you took cuttings, and then did you start them in little grow pots, or did you just stick them right into the ground in the vineyard where you wanted them
Well, I've
to
done
grow?
both, but we initially, to get the vineyard started, we put them. And I worked with NDSU with their greenhouse to start with,
Okay.
especially when we got the grant. It was like, well, let's do this right. And they were like, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll gladly help you with this, because they were fascinated by it. They have a great breeding program because they're really into hybrid grapes, and
Right.
one thing about Riparia is it's very it's resilient and like down to -71, I think. So
Oh my god.
it handles that really well. Um,
What I think's funny is that you probably know that from experience.
Totally. No, I've been out there where it's like negative. I mean, just last week, the day before you called, it was -33 when I got in the car, and
God.
it's really severe. Kind of, we hit those kind of. We have such a weird temperature range up in North Dakota, and of course, it ranges up to 118. Or one. I've seen it where it's been like one, you know, in the low hundreds, but they're on record. I should say,
Oh, gotcha.
main
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I think we have the world's record for the most extreme temperature shifts. You know,
Wow.
so
Wow.
that's something to be said. I mean, for grape growers, it's kind of a big deal. And
Yeah.
our danger zones are really in the spring. Spring killed me last year because it
Oh,
was
how
like,
so?
well,
Oh,
we got a light
frost.
frost. It was
Yeah.
typically frost I don't have to worry about after Mother's Day, like May 18th, but this thing came down. It was just one day. It was like 60s almost, and like one night it just decided to hit -23, and it was like late last week
Wow.
of May. So we were going to have a wonderful crop, but that's the kind of danger with growing that stuff, growing our grapes or any sort of grapes in our areas, is the severity in the spring, and then in the fall. Well,
Wow.
the one thing about us is we look for the frost to happen
Right.
before we harvest. So
So, yeah, you want okay, yeah, we'll definitely get to that, but you want, yeah, yeah, you want that in the fall. In the spring, though, I mean, so how resilient are they? Like when that happened, did you lose everything, or did some come out
what
later? Or,
we had,
what?
I'm I was thinking we'd get secondary buds coming through. I think what we had last year was the tertiary. It was last, third bud happening, and it was very
Wow.
little. But that was a
Okay.
very freakish. It was very freakish what happened
I
last
mean,
year.
it sounds freakish. Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't know what
I mean,
was going on there, and it was like kind of just in our little valley that it happened. So you get those things. It's
yeah.
kind of a weird area for that sort of spikes that happen.
Huh.
Um,
That's amazing. Well, okay, so how old is the vineyard now? Like how many generations of propagation have you been able to do from the original cuttings along the riverbank?
Yeah, I mean, really, for once it was established that what we're going to be using, we were probably, I want to say, '08, '09 is when we were really using it. I mean, the stuff that was from South Dakota's back. So we've been going 20 years, and we ripped out the South Dakota vines because they just weren't hacking it. And I
Right.
was seeing stuff just, we had this little bridge, and this one plant that was just produced, and every year produces just an amazing amount of fruit. I mean, when we were just for our family, we'd go up into the trees, and harvest that, because it's way up high. Though usually the fruit is like way up high, and we
Right.
were, you know, um, we'd pull some of it down, and do kind of like a pruning, I suppose, in a certain sense. But
Right.
um, but we were learning. I mean, that was kind of pre-frost. We were doing that, but it was right before frost, and there's such a difference after frost. That's really where you start getting. I don't know exactly all the chemistry that happens there. I just know what it tastes like. It's like the skin gets slack. There's a kind of, I would call it almost like it's fermenting on the vine at that point.
Oh wow.
It
Like it
has a kind of, I don't know, and on the temperature and everything, they're just it's
so
dead on for winemaking at that point. Where if you do it beforehand, and this is the classic thing where everybody talks about with Riparia, it has you have to watch, you'll get a weediness, you'll get a green apple kind of taste with it. You wait till afterwards in a hard frost, and it's a different game. It's still
wow.
Riparia, but it doesn't have the kind of.
Well, when you say it's still Riparia, so what are some of the, I mean,
It's
for somebody whose palate is trained to, European varieties, what would be some of the differences that you could expect when drinking
um
a wine made from Riparia?
well, it's a funny grape, and some of the stuff I find it like, I have a pretty decent kind of knowledge of wine. I mean, it has a boldness to it. It is definitely if you just have pure wild grape, it can come off like as bold as a cab, but it has this kind of very layered sort of berry sort of, you can taste everything from some years you can taste raspberry really pronounced in it.
Hmm.
And you kind of have like a dark fruit. When you're smelling it, the smell of it is really great, especially when you're fermenting it, and you can almost get into, um, almost kind of tobacco smells and that sort of thing, or almost chocolatey smells. It has a very interesting sort of.
This all sounds delicious to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It is a different sort of
how,
grape.
how did how did you discover this need to let it go through the grapes, let the grapes, so you let the grapes hang until the first heavy frost, basically, assuming the first heavy frost doesn't come while they're still green.
Right. Right, which came close one year where we were like, "Oh crap!"
Wow.
September. I mean, we've had. It was funny during this whole thing with the COVID. There was like literally in nature, we were finding really wide swings. Like
Yeah.
2020, it was like we had like a September snowstorm,
Wow.
and I had to really kind of. I let them hang for a little bit after that, but and then the warm temperatures come. That's the thing. It's like then you have that, and you have to make the call before it gets too warm. Normally in
Oh,
October it gets cold. You get the hard frost,
yeah.
and then it's cold. And you don't have to worry about all the weird stuff that can happen with heating back up after the first frost.
What do you mean by that? What weird stuff would happen?
Well, I mean, what I was worried about was probably some, God, you name it, just some rot,
Gotcha. Mildew, pressure,
mildew and
yeah,
all sorts of
fungus
things
of some
going
kind.
on, mold. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
got it.
and also just the wind comes in because after that first frost, it becomes slack and they're kind of delicate. So the berries, the grapes can start falling off really easily after
Oh,
that.
okay.
And um, you know,
And
when a frost like that comes in early too, the thing is that the stems aren't fully hardened off and dried, and
yeah.
that's kind of sucks. But like in an October, late October, you get it and they're totally dried, and you don't have to worry about any green sort of tastes, and kind of that herbaceous thing is not so pronounced at all. Actually, it's just it actually adds to the. I keep them on the stems and crush them. You know.
Oh, you do like a whole cluster
Yeah.
thing. So with the stems are included as they ferment.
Yep.
Oh,
For about I would want to say 4 to 5 days. 5 days would be probably what I would keep them on, and then we press.
okay. So pressing, and it's probably still a little sweet when you press,
Oh yeah,
I'm guessing.
yeah,
Okay. What do you measure, your Brix and your pH and everything like that when you're
yep.
harvesting? I mean, obviously when you're using nature as your guide rather than a number to harvest, out here it's like we could let it ripen until December some
Yeah,
years, you know what I mean? So we sort of have to keep a measurement, keep an eye on things, and we can't use that first frost as a as a barometer. But is it more, I mean, are you checking before that first frost, or are you just saying like, okay, we're gonna wait, we're gonna wait, the grapes look good, okay, here's the frost, great, let's pick and then measure? Or are you measuring up to that point to see where they are in terms of sugar
I'm definitely
accumulation,
checking
pH?
sugars because I want to see where we're
Okay.
at that way.
Okay.
Definitely check pH once we're harvested more so, but yeah, I do it
And
before that. But um,
what are you finding in terms of sugars and pH around harvest then?
oh, the pH can be, it's not too bad. It's like 3.6, 3.7.
Oh, well,
Really
that's, yeah.
the sugars can be really, 2018, we bloody had them at like 29.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which
I
is
mean,
nuts. I mean, but it's in this last year it was 27, 26. Um,
great.
I think the
That's
thing is like let them hold on, and after that first frost, I mean, there's a little bit of dehydration maybe that gets put into that as well because they're hanging on the vine longer. So I think sugar
yeah.
gets it's condensed in there. It's a weird structure to the grape. I've harvested them. I've left some hanging on certain trellises just to see what would happen, like in harvest in January,
Yeah.
and they don't fully freeze. They get kind of I don't know how to. It's just a kind of weird mushiness, and you're more in danger of them drying out, if anything.
Gotcha.
Um, but
It's like, I'm guessing, I mean, with a lot of fruit like that, when you freeze it, it basically explodes the cell structure
mhm.
within the grape because of that, the crystallization that happens.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm guessing something like that happens, so it loses all its turgidity. And I don't know, I'm just guessing. Does that sound right based on
yeah,
what you're experiencing on that
yeah,
end? Yeah.
totally. I mean, I think that's what is happening, and I'll even with that being said, the cell structure is kind of after that big freeze. I mean, the freezes are funny too because it'll be like some years it'll be like a snowstorm comes through, so it'll be like the days before we're harvesting, there'll be like, I mean, there's pictures on our like Instagram or whatever of like snow drifts on on the vines,
Right.
and which
I lo
it's kind of
Those are good
ridiculous.
photo ops. I like
Yeah, yeah,
that.
it's totally
Really
awesome.
insulating the wines at that point from the 71 below temperatures.
Totally, totally, and um, normally it goes back to like, well, when by the time we're harvesting, it's like you know upper 40s and stuff like that, but
Oh,
um it's just it dips down, and usually it'll be like a couple freezes. I'll allow it to have like light freezes. It usually happens like it hits 31, 30 for about an hour or two that night, but then the big one will come and it'll be like 28 for like you know 6 8 hours in the evening,
oh
and
wow.
that's where it's the
Yeah.
sweet spot. And I don't know, I wish I did know what was
So
happening there, but I just know by
when
the
you
taste and the.
that's what I was going to ask. So when you say the sweet spot, are you describing the chemistry, the flavor, the flavor of the grapes, the flavor of the finished wine, all the above? What is the sweet spot?
It's kind of, I judge it by kind of almost like it gets a jelly, like the actual grape structure, and there's a
Okay.
slackness to the skin. I mean, that's where I'm looking for it. Like it's really, oh, this is going to be good. Um,
Yeah.
Not every year
And so that
it happens, but when you get that, it's like really, really pretty great. But the problem with that is if it gets too much like that, harvest is kind of a bummer because then people are having to
oh,
stuff up, and it's a little more fragile
got it.
that way.
But what you're saying is when it gets to that state, it makes really good wine. Like the
Mm.
wine ends up being delicious.
Yeah, and I
Is
don't
that
know, it's like somehow the flavors open up more because you get the dark
interesting?
cherry.
Yeah.
You get this kind of like I taste like a weird tobacco thing, and I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, and there's like, it, it's a very autumnal sort of vibe to the whole taste of it,
Mm.
it's very deep
Oh,
and kinda, um I almost it makes me think more of like a Hungarian wine, like the dark red kind of
ah.
bull's blood sort of wine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's spicier. I had a friend take some of it and she was putting peppercorns in it and weird stuff like that. And
Like infusing it with stuff.
yeah, and that
Huh.
was really interesting. It lend itself that way. So it has almost like Eastern European kind of quality to it is the way I'd put it. You know, maybe some of the Italian red wines were that spiciness. I'm off the top of my head, but even that there's a severity to it that can be. It's not really tannic. There's a fruitiness. It's very different than you know. Even
Well,
when
it
you when
doesn't.
it's dry, it doesn't. It's still there's this kind of berry kind of fruitiness that it's a dark fruitiness to it. Um, It's kind of interesting and stuff I've been doing with it is because we have so much honey in North Dakota. We're like the biggest producer of honey, I think, in the world, or at least in the
Oh
states.
wow.
And we just literally have an apiary like in walking distance from us.
Right.
And he's got wonderful clover honey, wildflower honey, and mixing that stuff in. Then all of a sudden you're playing with some really nice layers of stuff, and that's where I'm kind of like I can start getting into more of the more Promethean sort of. I'm not really wanting to do classical styles because
Yeah.
I don't think that's really realistic in the environment we're at. I think there is always the good sensibilities of how you train vines and how you make wine and balance and stuff like that. We're dealing with a kind of the tastes of these things and what um everything kind of how am I trying to put this? I mean the actual local food and
Are
what
you
comes out
talking
of the
about?
land, so to speak. I mean,
Are you sort of talking about terroir, like, and sort of
yeah. I mean,
reflecting that?
I think, and really, there's a smell to everybody's area and taste in the air and what grows around there. Really, I think influences wine. It's start. I mean, some people think that's totally mystical sort of sounding, but wine is kind of that, isn't it? It's kind of a.
Yeah.
It is very much. It's
It
very
it
much
evokes more
Dionysus
than
as much as
just.
Apollo, right? It's
Yeah.
I like the wildness of it, but it that's my approach to it. I kind of like it
So,
for that
I
reason.
mean, when you're talking about the numbers that you're that your bricks level and your pH level, those are, I mean, that's California style, like in terms of, I mean, people are, I mean, the new wave of California, we're harvesting at like pH of 3.2 with, at 20 bricks. You know what I
Sure,
mean? Like, so you're like Napa Cab range really with those,
sure,
with that chemistry.
sure.
Um, and so when you're adding the honey, is that, I mean, you certainly don't need to bump up the sugars at that point.
No,
So I'm wondering,
but
so what are you doing? How are
with
you
the
trying
honey,
different
it
stuff
cuts.
or?
It's cutting some of the acidity of it too, and
Okay.
it kind of like allows it to breathe more. And there's something that happens, especially with the clover honey. Though the wildflower honey is interesting with it as well. And as I say, it's kind of a bit of an experiment too to see what can we do with this, because yeah, we could do a kind of a nice cabish sort of. I've even with the honey you can almost get into a Pinot Noir sort of quality to it.
Interesting.
It has that. I have made stuff where it has a lightness to it. It's not going to be as delicate and refined as that,
Uh-huh.
to my tastes of it. It's very drinkable.
Right.
It's um and with that, the honey brings out the kind of layers of, I mean, it's a layers of berries in it. I mean, you have all sorts of dark cherry, raspberry, especially this year. It was just like crazy off the vine in September. I mean, I was tasting a raspberry in it, and it just like, what the heck? Why is it that? This year, some
Well,
years.
here's
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say maybe the question that I'm struggling to ask is what are the values or philosophy that are guiding these decisions? Like you already mentioned that you're sort of trying to you're trying to represent this sort of ethereal or intangible element to that specific place on earth. Is that what you're trying to do? Like what? Because and what else do you do? I guess is the follow up question to that. Is there? I mean, so honey is one thing, and what other? How are these values or philosophies guiding? I mean, give me the whole story about how it's guiding in the winemaking.
Sure. A lot of it is just, and especially in that area, a lot of it is just what we're getting from that area food wise. So there's stuff that, you know, we, my wife and I, we will forage all through there, and it'll be
Uh-huh.
everything from like chicken of the woods, sort of, um, mushrooms, foraging for mushrooms. There's a lot of venison that you get in that
Uh-huh.
area because that whole culture there hunts. So if you're a meat eater,
Yeah.
there's that aspect as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's a kind of, in that area
Chick
specifically, there's a lot of, yeah, I mean, we've taken wormwood, mint, everything with the meads. We also make meads, of course, because there's honey everywhere and it's amazing honey. I mean, it's some of the best tasting honey I've ever had. So it
Wow.
would be foolish for us not to do that. We're really into keeping it local as possible. Even the oak barrels we do have, they're from Minnesota oak, and you know, to me, I think all of it, and there's some intangible aspect of it, but I feel like it's just got to be everything's local. You know, what
Yeah.
we're getting and sourcing from that little plot of land is really
Let me
important to me. There's some of it's
Why is that?
um part of it's the process, really. I think that's the inspiration for doing it, and the craftsmanship, and
Hmm.
creating something at our own as to what it is, as opposed to a lot of people make wine, and for example, and they'll be like, "Well, I want this grape to be like, you know, a California Cab, or tastes like a French Bordeaux," and they're not
Right,
really into
right.
where they're at and being who they are, and really
Yeah.
refining and balancing out what they're doing and taking the things that are given to them right there that they can grow in that climate, in that terroir, and that's, to me, you know I mean, that's what everybody did. It's like,
Yeah.
going back to how wine was developed in medieval France. It was just form follows function. They had barrels, and the barrels were not like, they weren't thinking the way a lot of you know, people are
Right.
thinking now. It's like, they're just, they're trying to make it, it's like, some of it is just, you want to make something that tastes good, and this is how we do
Yeah.
it, and this is in accord with what we have around here. And I mean,
Right.
there's a certain simplicity to it, but anybody that's been out in a vineyard and worked in it, and you just get to know the weather patterns, and just, if you've done it for years, there's something else to it, and there's the art for, like, um there's a there's the kind of mystical kind of quality of things where you can't really pin it down, and I'd imagine, you can't put a number on it, because it isn't
Yeah.
about a number every year, right? I mean, there's the smell, the taste, it's just a feel to certain things, and I can't really say that, the numbers, you just, I mean, at the end of the day, you're just working with, what you got, right? I mean, that's every
Yeah.
winemaker ultimately. And some years are shit, some years are not so great, and some years are amazing. And then you're
Yeah.
working with that, and then it's like, sometimes you can screw up a good year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the bad years are the things that you find gold in. But I think it's this how you're interfacing with the actual land that you're in. And I'm not really thinking. I don't have a lot of background in sort of chemistry or anything like that. It's really just more of the inspiration of just the landscape, tasting those vines. You just know your plants when you're dealing with them, and you know kind of where the climate and what you're eating with it and that sort of
W-
thing. I mean, it's more
Well,
simple, I guess, in that way.
yeah. Well, and well, let me ask you, what is your? I mean, what's your background in? I mean, are you a farmer? Did you? I mean, did you grow up in a farming, agricultural situation, family? Like, what got you out interacting with the land so regularly?
Well, yeah, all my family in that area was all farmers, ranchers. I have aunt and uncle, they're buffalo farmers up in the Missouri. So there's kind of that sensibility of doing those sorts of things. And I just grew up with it. I was always in that area. I know that river really well. I've gone up and down it, whether being canoeing or swimming in it and all that stuff. So it's I don't know. It's just kind of natural to do that. So
Yeah.
why we did it was initially just because of the love of it. Why not make some wine out of this, right? And we started
Yeah.
doing that, and it kind of just snowballed from that. And people were really interested in it, and you start giving wine to friends and that sort of thing, and showing
Yeah.
people what you're doing. You find other winemakers, and the great thing about winemaking and wine people that are vintners, especially in our area, is like it. Everybody kind of teams together, and they want to trade information. It's because there's a pioneering aspect to it as well. It's you're breaking new ground. A lot of these guys are dealing with hybrid grapes, which that's totally pioneering in that area. They're facing sometimes they face diebacks that are just insane, you know,
Right. Because they
and
don't
then they'll hit
quite have the
gold at the
hardiness
same
of,
time. So it's like, um,
oof.
it's
Yeah.
part. It takes a kind of. I mean, everybody. If you're in this area, it's kind of like there's a little nuttiness that goes along with it, which is a good kind of nutty.
Yeah. Yeah. Or masochism, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's weird because it's like it is a kind of in North Dakota especially. There's a kind of weird sort of pioneer sensibility, and then everybody's Scandinavian, so they're all kind of like is that kind of Viking blood sort of thing where you're living in like I said -33. There's like sort of ethos to it. It's where you kind of especially this time of year, it's brutal, but at the same time, you kind of like it a little bit, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like going
Yeah.
out to
No,
like prune, and it's like it's 2 feet of snow in the vineyard. There's something awesome about that, and the wind coming down. I mean, you're in a parka, and there's something about it that's really great at the same time, and
that's amazing.
you know,
Yeah. I did a little time in the Midwest, and I mean, I went to school in Iowa, and then I did a cattle drive in um, western South Dakota.
awesome.
And I remember being out there and just being like, I cannot believe I'm like out in the middle of nowhere, haven't seen a person for, 3 hours of driving,
Yeah,
and I'm like, and then there's a North Dakota,
yeah,
like I was like just blown away at the scale and scope and the sort of vastness of that terrain. And yeah, it's awe inspiring, and does have an ethos to it for sure. Yeah, it's I
yeah.
love hearing you talk about it actually.
I mean, there's a whole scope of people. I don't mean you never know what people think outside of it, but there's a scope of people that come through that are real kind of rugged individualists, I suppose, but they're beyond that. They kind of have their own thing, and it's like, I don't know what it is. They kind of, the winemakers I know are all kind of like eccentric in some way. And like, I mean, in a good way, but it's like you kind of like that extreme experience. And um, wine generally, I think sometimes people think of it as more of, well, you're always about balance in wine, right? But like
Mhm.
finding the balance in that real extreme of frost and fire, literally. Um,
Yeah.
it's that's kind of the thing that it's driving you on to try and hit those magic years. Like last year was a total bust. We didn't get a lot, but at the same time, you start getting more innovative. Like, well, we got to work with honey more, and that sort of thing,
Right.
because it's
And that's because of that crazy frost that you had, that late
yeah,
crazy frost, so that's why it was such a low year, and then you have to
totally. I mean,
adjust.
it totally decimated, but I mean, everybody has to adjust when they have a bad year. I mean, I'm sure California, you have all sorts of things that come through,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then insects and stuff like that. There's no kind of free lunch in the thing. I think winemaking in general, there's a little bit of
What
that craziness to everybody that
it
does that.
Well, and it sounds like, I mean, using the grapes that grow right there, like directly adjacent to the vineyard that you've moved them
Mhm.
into, sounds like the best insurance that you can have, at least, for some of this craziness. Is that, I mean, at least the climate craziness, yeah. Is
Totally. I
that,
mean,
yeah.
we've never had dieback really. I've had some stuff happen where, it was really cold one year and we had some split trunks because it was like I don't know, before everything hardened off, we had a really hard freeze. So of course you're going to have some. I mean, no vine is going to be impervious to that, but yeah, as far as like for us, those vines, they know, they're used to that genetically or whatever it is. They're used to that climate,
Yeah.
getting whipped around in the wind, um,
Okay.
and how they respond to pruning and all that sort of stuff. But
Well, that reminds me. Okay, you said you're using the males to create hedgerows or windbreaks.
yeah,
I think that's brilliant. And I mean, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
yeah. What I basically did is I started using the male plants. Like, I'd stagger. I know I basically did some in the middle and on the edges on the outside, and it kind of comes through because that wind. I won't prune those, right? So
Mm,
I mean, I'll prune them to a certain extent, but like, I won't prune them like I'm pruning the females. And so they're nice, big and bushy. And so when the wind comes through you can get, I mean, if I'd let it, that wind can whip those things around and you start losing everything. Um, and
oh,
it helps
well,
quite a
yeah.
bit to have those big bushes because Vitis Riparia is like, they turn into bushes quickly. So it's a wall, and even in when I'm
Right.
pruning in summer, it's kind of like we get a lot of rain. It's a lot of work without a doubt.
Yeah.
And you'll have just a giant wall. And to get everything where there's enough, the nice thing about the wind is it dries everything out generally, but
Right.
Vitis Riparia also it'll just start binding together, and you got to go through and pull everything apart so that you get enough airflow if it's really a lot of rain. I've never
Right.
really had any problems with like a little bit of downy mildew or whatever. Um,
Now, are
Nothing.
you spraying for any of this stuff, or do you not
No,
need to
no, we
spray?
haven't had to really spray yet, and knock on wood. I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of those
So,
things that, I mean, I say
do you
that.
do anything in the vineyard? Like, do you have to irrigate? Do you have to, do you have
We
to fertilize? Do you
we
have
did put
to?
it in a drip system that we got initially. We got it when we wrote the grant. We're like, well, we'll get these established in this area, and we'll just do a little drip system, and that worked well. So we put those in. But I try to like, last year was a drought on top of it, but we didn't, you know, it, I take it as it comes. I don't. I try to mitigate watering to a certain degree,
Yeah.
because it's like they're really vigorous. I mean,
Right. Right.
otherwise you're pruning all summer,
Right.
and that's
So you're basic. Are you watering just then when it's when you get like a dry spell, or is it?
yeah.
I mean, are you?
I mean, August will hit like a really dry spot generally, and that be a little bump because I mean, um, I try to. I'm still for me. I'm trying to get like a little bit of the feel for watering these things and when the fruit in August. That's where veraison hits. So we're kind of
Okay. I was gonna ask. Yeah.
um, you know. I tend to, in August, I try to give it a little shot of water at that point, but it's every year is a little bit different, to be honest. And there it's like some years it'll be just crazy rain, and you wouldn't think it, and then sometimes it won't be anything at all. And last year was like nothing; it was just a really
S-
bad drought.
So other than water, I mean, what else do you have to do in there besides prune and water and
Um,
hedge? It sounds like you're doing a lot of hedging throughout
yeah,
the
I mean, a lot of it is
summer.
just keeping, or the wind is knocking things off the trellis system a lot, and I mean,
So just
you're tying
going
stuff up,
retying everything.
and
Got it.
cutting things out. I mean, a lot of the shoots at the bottom get crazy, so
Okay.
I'll get like I'll get some people to come out there and we just go through there. But I mean, the thing is about this plant too is it like pruning it activates it, it fights back a bit more, and like even with pruning in
Ah,
general, so you get a lot of lateral shoots happening. If
right,
you're too
right.
aggressive with pruning, like I got really aggressive one year, I'm just like I'm going to do this, and man, I had lateral shoots coming out every which it fought back harder. Is what basically happened.
It's like a hydra, right?
Yeah, it's
Cut
very
off one
much.
head and you get like 10 more.
Yeah, it was
um,
totally.
so is that are they putting fruit out on the laterals or no?
They can actually. It's
Okay.
weird
Yeah.
though. I mean, that's the part where they last year was kind of odd. So I mean, they were shooting out fruit even in August. There was like little clusters they were trying to form, but I don't know if
Yeah.
that's normal. And uh,
I have some peanut plants that do that too.
okay,
Yeah, the couple. I mean, they're just monstrous for whatever reason. I don't know. They got some really crazy peanut plants that they like put laterals out, and the laterals put laterals out, and all of they all put out grapes. So I'm like, yeah, same thing. Grapes are growing, are
yeah,
forming. Going through veraison in November,
yeah,
basically,
yeah.
if I let it. It's crazy. Yeah, that's so. Uh, I mean, there's so many. So you haven't said anything about spraying anything. So I'm guessing you're not spraying anything at
No,
all.
I mean we try to avoid that if at all possible. I don't think we had crown gall one year that we had to spray for. It was really, really
Okay.
bad. Um, Other than that, no. I mean, it in general, I kind of, it's really about, if we need to water, we water, and otherwise, a lot of it is pruning, to be honest. Even
Right.
and
So no, you don't need to till. I don't know. What do you do for the grasses? I mean, do you mow or anything like that?
yeah, we do mow.
Okay.
I mean, we have grass. We put down initially. We put down like some plastic when we put it down, but the grass just grows right through it, and once the plants take root, that root system seems to just it holds on. I've never really had a plant totally die back
Yeah.
the way um, some people have had. Like the hybrids. Uh,
Yeah. Nobody's crazy enough to be growing straight vinifera there, are they?
Not that I know of. Not that
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how you do it in North Dakota, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I
I
don't
mean,
either.
because, like I say, like the severity of it, and I mean, there's probably somebody that's
Somebody did
tried it
once. It lasted a year, basically.
at best. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it surviving the winters.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Um,
the hybrids are really interesting. What I've had of them, I'm like. was it the Crimson Pearl and the Petite Pearl are ones that are really kind of interesting. You can make very
Okay.
nice or delicate reds out of that. But it's a different flavor. I think the thing is like it's there's a point where people are going to have to be when you're dealing with the hybrids or what I'm doing. You can't look at it like it's a California grape or a European grape or Far Eastern or whatever. It's its own thing, really, and
Yeah.
we have to like look at it differently. I mean, I look at the wild grape as a totally different beast in a lot of ways because it's so dark and red. It's like a deep purple color. Um,
I mean, these are the ones that you've propagated,
yeah,
the wild grapes.
yeah.
And when you say you look at it differently, do you mean? I mean, what? How does that impact what you're doing and seeing
Um,
in the vineyard and in the winery?
I mean, it's a kind of a work in progress in some ways. So I'm still trying to figure. I
Mm,
mean, initially I was thinking like, we'll just do an approach where maybe we get a nice, good, like a dry red wine and I actually got some stuff that was very nice, almost Bordeaux like, and at the same time it was like, well, it didn't have it was kind of forcing the character as to where, you know what I'm saying,
mm.
Riparia has its own thing, and I've taken to for our own wine doing crazy stuff with it, with the honey and then like dry
Yeah.
hopping wine. And
Oh, yeah, you mentioned the dry hopping. How did that turn out?
I think it's actually dry hopping the Riparia was strangely works. I don't know if it'd be a commercial thing, but it's definitely
For your palate, it
for my
was
palate was really interesting. And we mix in honey with it, depending on how much, a lot of this is coming into blending, and uh,
right.
you get your set for the year and you see what you come up with. And I think it's going to be I mean, a lot of I'm kind of more inspired by what mead makers are doing, like, especially in Denmark. There's some stuff that I've come across, and I'm like, well, it's so outside the box compared to what's normally going on in the wine world. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of intrigued by that. As to I love the classical stuff, but like wine has been a lot of different things since its inception, and I don't know why we were stuck on one sort of like trajectory, which is it's kind of Bordeaux based, right? Even in California, everybody's referencing that, and now California's kind
Yeah.
of, or the mainstream guys, and they're doing their thing and they're the template. But there's like a lot of different places and a lot of, I mean, you look in Greece and you got Retsina. I mean, that to me is really interesting, like a piney sort of wine. Some people find that kind of strange, but I think people's palates are getting bigger and bigger in this day and age too. So who's to
Yeah.
say, really? I mean, I'm kind of in a postmodern zone, I suppose, on wine a little bit, but where it's like, why
It's
not?
a
What if it works? That's that's great, I think. I mean, and there's why not try different things? I mean, wine used to be contain a lot more herbs and spices over the years, and in ancient times it was almost like that was the carrier for the medicine. So
yeah.
it's kind of interesting, how it's become one thing where it can be, I think it can really
Yeah.
grow into a lot of different things, and people's perceptions of it, um they play with it a little bit, you know
Are you suggesting diversity in the wine world might be a good thing?
I think so. I mean, look what happened with beer. I mean, like, oh,
Right?
these
Yeah.
breweries come out, and I think they shocked a lot of people with just, I mean, some of them present like what fine wine. They started taking that on, which was a unique sort of approach. And then there's like the gimmicky sort of things that people do, which is great. And there's stuff that's really hardcore, sort of like smoked beer and that sort of thing, which is that's going to be more probably for a select kind of people. But you know, I think we're living in an age right now would be really, especially in the wine industry. I could see a lot of things happening where outside of the box coming in, a little more Promethean and an upstart sort of thing happening.
Yeah.
And
I
I mean,
think,
wine to me is like the cool thing about it is it's so close to the ground in a way. If
yeah.
you make it, and there's something about that process, there's something primal about that process to humanity. And, you know, um, I think people, really doing that and taking what, from my philosophy is just what is there. I mean, even fruit wines, and stuff like that. Like, a friend of
Yeah.
mine jokes about in North Dakota, there's a lot of rhubarb wine.
Yeah.
But it's like, but that's what they have, and
Yeah.
what we have around, there's a lot of rhubarb. So, I mean, and it's like, well, that's a local sort of thing that's, they're making that, and
Yeah.
it's what we have at hand, we can't
It
grow,
sounds like something that
like,
would go.
no, go ahead.
I was saying, I was just gonna say, it sounds like something that would go really well with venison, depending on how you prepared it.
Totally,
A
totally.
rub
I mean, it's something like that, even, I mean, it's, I mean, it's all a reflection of what people are eating there. I mean, outside of the kind of like, in the, what do you call it? The kind of more corporate sort of eateries where
right.
it gets the homogenized sort of stuff, but like what your people that are like, really going out there growing stuff. Um, I think that, that for me, that's the kind of the philosophy of just doing this from the beginning. Was
Yeah.
what can we do with what the land offers us, you know? And how
Yeah.
can we make it better, and how can we train it? How can we take a lot of the ideas of what have been done over the years, but how do some of those ideas don't apply to us at all because we're in North Dakota, right? And
Yeah.
no matter what we do and how much we wish it's not going to be Merlot, or what I'm saying. We just got
It's
to,
not gonna be, yeah.
yeah. So we take a lot of different materials and figure out how to make something good to drink out of that. I mean, it's as simple as that, kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jason, you've taken the most natural, most obvious steps to that anybody, with that who just landed on planet Earth, I think would take to create a wine, which is look around, find the best things that are growing nearby, propagate them in a way that enhances that the good things that you want out of them, and
Mhm.
then make wine from it. I mean, the fact that it's revolutionary is the funny thing.
Yeah,
The fact that it isn't being done more often is what's so surreal to me.
yeah. I mean, people. I
It's
mean,
what you're doing is absolutely sane and natural and just so normal. Like it's the normal thing that anybody should do. I'm just laughing because I just the whole thought of like this imported world that we have in the wine industry I mean, it's so surreal when you just look at the approach that you've taken and how I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
I totally know what you
it just
mean. I mean, it's like I love
yeah,
that at the same time. Like I love being able to
yeah,
experience all of that, and it's all, like I say, I really like, across the board. I mean, wine in general. You almost take a trip with each one from
yeah,
different regions, and it's there's something beautiful about it. I mean, it really is. I think that's the kind of core kind of principle behind it. Is like it is, a reflection of where it comes from. Hopefully,
yeah,
I mean, there's a kind of approach too where you can be like, "Ooh, it's all in the chemist's lab," which that's kind of cool too. I mean, but the stuff that really makes me excited is, you know, how is this a reflection of this terroir? But the terroir is really like the culture that's interfacing with it, and the sensibility of it, and what they're eating with it, and that sort of thing. To me, it that's the kind of inspiring stuff that comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, I know we brought up hunting, and I told you I was looking on your website, so I just wanted to ask before we sign off, what do you do about all those deer and eating potentially your grapes?
Oh, it's quite simple. We have like a little electric fence, and what I
Uh-huh.
do is I put some electric tape on it and a little bit of peanut butter, and they go up to it, they'll sniff that, and they'll get a zap on the nose, and they stay away from it. And it
And
works. And
that's
I know it sounds crazy, but it works because I'll have them.
and so
And also, it
that's
helps.
around everything. That's around the vineyards, and you don't have to put up a huge big fence. You just
No,
do that.
the first one we put up a big fence that we kind of walled off with we grew we have wild grapevines growing on it, so it's like they will come up to that and they'll munch a little bit, but not as much as you'd think.
Yeah.
I it's funny. I've never had them try to get in since that. Putting that up, they just they'll be all around. They'll literally be the
Yeah.
fields next to it, and like I have like on our website just pictures of them all over the place. But that's
Yeah.
that's is a trick I learned from a Minnesota vine keeper, and he said it was just as
So
simple as that. And he had
one
one
strand?
one strand. We put two up, which
Uh-huh.
um, you put a little peanut butter on it, and they go up and sniff it, and I think they can smell the electricity. Is one somebody told me. It's like they can smell it. They also know. I don't know. Deer are weird sort of animals. I don't know how they perceive things, but um, they definitely stay away from the vines.
Huh.
And um, I mean, hunting season happens there only like for it's usually in
Like
late
a couple
October.
weeks, right?
Yeah, it's a couple of weeks in late
Yeah.
October. So it's like the harvest is already done by that time. So um, I've never had them try to hop in, and even on the perimeter fence that we have them growing like a wall, a little bit in the spring they'll eat the green shoots, like the eat those a little bit,
Mm,
but you know, other than that, they don't. And then thankfully we have a lot of cornfields and alfalfa fields around too, so that's probably
that helps. Yeah.
helps quite a bit as well.
Gives them something else to
Yeah.
to distract them. Well, you mentioned your website. What is your website that you want people to go to if there is one,
Oh,
or
well, I
what?
think
How?
one of our Instagram on Kesselring Vineyards is kind of up to date. It's almost
Okay.
weekly where we're showing what's going on out there. And it's so if you want to see what it's like in the deep winter and when we're pruning and we have a lot of the animals there, you're seeing like weekly updates of coyotes and deer and you name it, eagles. And I mean, we get a lot of stuff just flying around and there. So it's, um,
Yeah. Do you have to worry about gophers at all tearing up roots or anything?
no, we've had problems with voles one year and,
Voles. Okay.
they kind of, it was a heavy
G-
winter and um,
They like girdle the trunk, right?
yeah,
Like,
they just chewed up like I don't know how many, but it was a good amount. Some of them survived, but other than that, we haven't had that problem really. Um, we've been pretty fortunate. So knock on wood. I mean, the biggest thing is probably the frost in the spring is our, you know, um, this thing
yeah.
can
That.
contend with.
Well, man. I mean, this is. I thank you for sharing all this. This is really cool to talk to you and learn more about it. It's it's just very cool. I can't even I don't even know how to put into words why. I mean, like I said, it's just the most normal thing, and yet uh you put it really beautifully in the way that you spoke about the way that you approach it, and it's just anyway, I'm very happy to have had you share your story. This is
Awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
glad we
you.
got to talk. Yeah, man. Thanks. I hope. Yeah, it's kind of a primal kind of approach we have, I suppose. But it's kind of that's kind of the landscape we're in. So, well,
I love you've mentioned Vikings on your website that I was looking at, and it was I mean, you mentioned something that hasn't been brought up on this podcast by any other guest before, that North America was originally found, but the first Europeans who came here, so they were those Vikings in like 1000 AD,
Yeah,
and they called it Vinland,
yeah, yeah,
because of all the grapes growing on Vineland, basically.
yeah, and they were making
Um,
wine out of it too, which is kind of interesting that they found it good for making wine grapes, at least in the sagas that they have in the Vinland sagas and such.
Vinland, is that how it's pronounced? Okay,
Yeah, I mean, at least how we pronounce it
yeah,
here, but it,
got it.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's very likely. I don't know what other grape variety it would be, but the one we're growing, um, which is a northern variety, so it's very likely that that's what they're pulling, um, and taken back to Iceland and Greenland, and I would love to know what the heck they were doing with it, but
I wonder that there's probably some genetic trail we could follow on some vines, planted somewhere up there, in Iceland or Greenland, and be like, oh, look, there they are. It's
yeah,
like a North Dakota Riparia or
yeah,
something,
totally, totally.
or, wherever. Well, thank you very much, man. It's been really great to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your story, and
Awesome.
I hope people. I hope. Are now the one final thing though.
Mm.
Would be remiss to not say is buying your wine. It's not quite out yet, right? So people need to check back,
Yeah,
just tune in.
within the year, we're gonna have a wild grape. It's a port style fortified wine, pure wild grape, sweetened with a little honey, and then we have probably 2017, 2018, 2019 will be bottled shortly thereafter, and some meads as well, wild grape meads. So we're playing around with a few
And so,
different things. So
and are there? Do you do a dry wine as well? Do you do just a straight Riparia dry wine?
yeah, I'm hoping to
Okay.
have that at least 17 and 18. I think we'll have just a straight dry wine there. I mean,
Oh,
18,
that's a lot
18.
of age. What are you aging them in?
They've all been aged in oak barrels at some point. Um,
The
19 is
Minnesota
about to
oak
get up.
that you were talking about.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
I think 17, to be honest, was that one was a French oak. No, no, that was
Okay.
American oak. But it was. I can't say
American oak.
that was. That was
Minnesota.
I can't say that was Minnesota. I'm not sure what the
Got
age
it.
of that.
Probably like Missouri or something,
Yeah,
or Arkansas.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, still, that's okay. So a lot of age time. I mean, I didn't even. I mean, there's so much more we could get into, but that sounds really interesting. I mean, are these really tannic wines that you're tasting and you're just like, I need the tannins to calm down, or why the long
yeah. Some of it's
aging?
that and the acidity. I like it starts to roll off to me and soften a little bit. I like it that way. But that
Okay.
being said,
Yeah.
I'm kind of more inclined as I get to know this grape more. We're kind of um, each year you learn about it because you have the prior year and how it ages. I don't have a reference really to you know it's not like other grapes. I only have
Yeah.
what I have, and that's how I know it ages this way and what it does. And we have a good 10 years of experience of real wine that we could have drank over the years, and how it ages. It hits a point after, for me, 3 years, it's really great. But that being said, I'm finding, people really like it straight away too. So,
Yeah.
um, we'll see. The initial thing, like I say, was we were wanting to make a fine sort of drier wine, and now I'm kind of feeling more that the mixture of honey into it really starts it takes it into a different zone to me, like
Yeah.
more like us, you know, and what we were doing, and what more of my personal ethos of like we're taking a lot of different things and putting them together and
Okay.
making something better out of it. Um, I mean, it sounds really simplistic, but that's kind of what you're doing.
No, I
Um,
mean, that's great. I think it's craftsmanship. I think it's like knowing your place and feeling your way through it, and yeah, that all sounds good to me.
yeah, yeah,
Well, thank you again. I
yeah, man.
appreciate all that.
I'm really glad we got to chat here, and I hope people are interested in what we're talking about, I think it's winemaking is. I think everybody should do it. So.
Well said. Well said. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I hope you got as much out of that conversation as I did. I really appreciate your time and attention. I want to introduce you to the Ecological Wine Score. It's a new way of scoring wine that will soon become the only wine score that matters. Now, I know if you're like me, you don't really care about wine scores. They're subjective, they always score certain types and styles of wine higher, and most importantly, they don't take into account the farming behind the wine. I personally don't care if your wine scores 100 points and is considered the best tasting wine on earth if you grew the grapes conventionally with chemical sprays and herbicides. I don't want to drink it. The Ecological Wine Score changes all of this. First of all, the sensory experience of the wine only accounts for 10% of the score, and it's determined by multiple certified wine professionals rather than one appointed expert. And the rest of the score is determined by clear, objective benchmarks that evaluate human and animal welfare, vineyard ecology and terroir preservation, and operations, winemaking, and packaging. I created the Ecological Wine Score because scoring wine based only on its flavor is like awarding the Nobel Prize based on how someone dresses. You can really only judge greatness in context, or the judgment will be meaningless. So, check out the Ecological Wine Score at ecologicalwinescore.com. This is the future of wine scoring.